Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Connecting with Our Community webinar led by Studio Designer CEO Keith Granet. We appreciate you taking the time to attend this webinar today. Today, our guest is Alex Shuford III, Century Furniture President. We invite you to submit written questions anytime during the session. After Keith and Alex finish their conversation, we will begin our audience Q&A. If you go to the GoToWebinar control panel under questions, you will see a dialog box to type in your questions as seen in this screenshot. We will try to address as many questions as possible in the 45 minutes that we have. And now, here is Studio Designer CEO Keith Granet.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our third session of Connecting Our Community for Studio Designer. We're glad you're all with us. We created this webinar series so that we could help you understand and navigate these challenging times with experts from all aspects of our industry, in leadership, in management, from our vendors and from other designers, and hope that you gain a tremendous amount of insight to help you through this. It's my pleasure today to introduce you to Alex Shuford III, who is the CEO of RHF, which is the parent company of Century Furniture, Hancock & More, Hickory Chair, Highland House, and a few other brands that you recognize. So welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Keith. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you. These are crazy times. How are you doing?
Trying times for sure. We're sort of struggling along and figuring it out day by day. I was laughing with our group recently. We write a plan for what we think is the new world order about every 2 days. And then 2 days later, we tear it up, throw it away, and write a new plan. So,
right.
So far, we may be on plan 10.
So you just sort of give us some idea of what this experience has been like. You know, it's different for everybody.
Yeah, we tell everybody a little bit about us because it kind of flavors how it's been for us. We're about 1,750 employees across 7 different factories, and that stable of brands that you mentioned, Hickory Chair, Century, Highland House, Hancock. And so the hardest part for us in all of this has been trying to navigate through the people side in the kindest way possible, but doing it so that we also increase our ability to get through the crisis in one piece. And, you know, we spend probably a couple of hours a day talking through exactly that because we're a large business and not a small business, as defined by the Small Business Administration. A lot of this payroll protection loan to grant money is not available to us. So the one tool that was made available to us are these enhanced unemployment benefits, which are great. It's a great way the federal government's helping, and we're helping our people get signed up so they can access it. The problem is, you don't think about it, a lot of our people don't have email addresses, or some are not even able to read and write. So we've got our HR team deployed, actually walking our production people through getting signed up, making sure they're answering the questions correctly, being there as a support line for them because we've got people that have waited 3 and 4 hours on hold with unemployment services. Just things you don't necessarily, I guess everybody in the country is dealing with it now, but that's been top priority. The next biggest piece for us is communicating with our suppliers and our accounts, our customers, about who can take deliveries when, who could take a delivery but not deliver it to their own customer, so that would put them in a financial strain. We don't want to do that to them. We run our own trucks around the country. We've got a lot of places where we can't send trucks right now. We've also have drivers that are older. They don't feel comfortable driving around the country. Another thing, anybody that's ever been through a tour of a furniture factory down here in North Carolina, a lot of our workforce is older. They're in the at-risk category. So early on, even before our governor told us that we were going to have a stay-at-home notice or mandate, we had made the decision to close down because, frankly, we just couldn't think through a way to get our population as safe as possible in the short amount of time we had. And a case that would have happened in one of our factories could have been very much like having a case in a retirement community in many ways. That population is 30-40% of our population's in the at-risk category. So by making that decision early, we were able to kind of maneuver through some things before it was mandated, because that governor's mandate from North Carolina came out late in the day on a Friday when everybody was already closed. So we've done, we think, some things that were smart. We also have now started producing face masks. I think we're one of probably 100,000 small places in America trying to figure out how to make PPE. But somebody asked me recently, do you think, it'll make a difference? I said, it'll make a difference for a few people in the medical community here, for our own employees, and for companies that we know that we can send them to. But it also makes a difference for the soul of our employees to know that they're able to, even in a small way, make a difference to the frontline workers. So, here's my, I showed it to you earlier, but my highly fashionable RHF produced face mask. Just model it for everybody. We're calling it the duck-billed platypus. We
there you go.
Be all the rage in High Point when we reopen. We'll be giving them out on the street corners. So.
But you were saying that mask actually is what, 80% close to the N95?
Yeah, we've got a local doctor that's been working with us, kind of consulting on the construction of it. There's a lot of masks that are being made that are a bit more decorative, a bit more attractive, but they don't create a full seal, which is what the N95s do. Both the filtering material is of a certain quality, to filter out 0.6 micron particulates, but also it creates a full seal around your face. And the local doctor, basically, when we were giving him some original, we've gone through about 20 prototypes. Some of the originals, he said, they're great, but frankly, when my nurses and I are going to need to use these, even though they're not accredited, you might as well try as hard as possible to make them as useful as possible to us, because we're going to end up needing some of these things that, when we run out of our own protective equipment. And so he's been working with us on how to design something that's both rapidly manufacturable, using materials we already have available in our factories, because the other things you can't get supplies, but that comes as close as possible to what they're using. And he said, basically, out of our last prototype, he considered it better than this. Now, these are not medical masks. This is my disclaimer, but he considered them better than the surgical masks that a lot of his people are now having to use. And he promptly said, how quickly can you get me a few hundred? So, which I thought was a pretty good sign. But, at the end of the day, we're all going to be, we also have fashion masks, right? This is, a very fashionable mask that what is that, Keith?
How many are you hoping to make?
We think we can make a few thousand a week, and we may be able to ramp up even higher than that. The nice thing is we can cut them on our cutting machines, and we're working on a way to fuse them instead of having to sew them, because when you sew them, you perforate the material, and when you perforate the material, you're creating openings that particulates can come through. We've also reached out to some testing labs to try to get the material that we have readily available tested in a filtration lab. But everybody, as you can imagine, in the country is sort of under a stay-at-home notice. And also, if you've got some ability to help the mask production world, you're swamped at the moment. So I'd rather them help 3M, because 3M can make millions a week, and we can only make thousands, but we want to do what we can. Really, what we want to do is start making and shipping furniture again, because that's what we're good at.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on doing that. I think, we all need to do what we can do, and it's pretty fantastic that you're able to do that.
Appreciate it.
How are you communicating these days with, like you said, some of your staff, you actually don't even have email addresses or can't read or write, but for management, are you using, are you on Zoom calls all the time like we are?
So a little bit. I'm writing, it feels like 2 or 3 memos a day, which we're printing out and handing out to our people, or mailing to our people, emailing where possible. We also have a phone tree where all of our employees are connected up through their supervisors into their plant managers and then up to us. So when we disseminate information out, we do it kind of through that. It's the same phone tree we use in a emergency situation like an ice storm or something of that level. Where we can't come into work. So that's been a good tool. With our customers, my sister who runs our marketing is trying to teach me to be a better social media user. So I am finally kicking and screaming, learning how to post and tweet. She reminded me that my 16-year-old daughter is home from school, so she could teach me how to use these tools since my sister can't come and visit me personally. So we're trying to use all those tools, I think, like everybody is. At the end of the day, we have probably about 50 people working across all of our facilities, just trying to keep them up. And then that group is getting on a conference call basically every day to update where we are, the status of the facilities, any issues that are cropping up in our workforce so that we can jump on them, trying to make sure we're providing benefits in order to get them through these times and things of that nature. But yeah, it's never before and hopefully never again.
What percentage of those 1,700 employees are in North Carolina? Most of them?
We are 99% in North Carolina. So our showroom staffs around the country would be the only employees that are not here in North Carolina. Century and Hickory Chair showrooms and all the rest of the facilities are within an hour distance of where I'm sitting, and most within 20 minutes.
Okay, wow. So has anything surprised you during this process?
You know, I think somebody asked me the other day, they said, how is this different than 08, 09? Or how is it different than 9/11? It was a younger person in our workforce who hadn't been really through that scenario as an adult. And I said, you know, with 9/11, it was an absolute disaster. And then the next day, the recovery sort of began, right? You kind of had a moment in time. It was devastating, but then you could wake up and begin to at least start to recover. Said in 08, 09, it was a little bit more of this rolling, cascading disaster, but everyone was still at work. Everyone was still, you know, it was just one phase of what we're dealing with, because, you know, now we've got both the economic collapse on top of the viral and epidemiology fear and curve. And then we also have people that are not able to go into the place where, frankly, they spend most of their lives. You know, our work for us, talking to a lot of our managers in the last week or two, is a place of comfort, right? You come into the office and we all sort of begrudge it a little bit, but secretly in our subconscious, it's a comforting area. It's something we're used to. It's a habit. And so the fact that you can't even go to the place where you are surrounded by the people that you know and do the things that are your daily habits that keep you comfortable is this sort of third phase of the disaster. And I was trying to explain to this young person that, look, we're going to get through it, but everything's going to change after this. I said, you know, what you didn't see because you weren't, I don't know that they were even maybe alive when 9/11 happened, was that the world, there was a before and an after that moment in time. And everybody that experienced it knew that the world would be fundamentally different after. And then 08, 09, we sort of said the same thing. Look, this is an economic collapse unlike any other since the Great Depression. There will be a before and after. And for our business, there was. That was a terribly difficult time for the furniture industry. You know, and coming out of it, companies were just fundamentally different. They were smaller. They, you know, a lot of really good people you weren't able to keep in your workforce going through it. And now we're dealing with something that's at least equal to those in its scope. It's global in its reach, and it's fundamental in the way we react to the world. You know, the way we, you know, I'm Southern. We hug and we handshake and we, right, and we stand next to each other and we hold the door for each other and we do all these, you know, and all of a sudden we're having to relearn habits. For the first week of the crisis, I walked through every single one of our facilities a couple of times just to stop and talk to groups of people. And every time that first week I'd stop to talk to people, people would walk up and reach their hand out to shake my hand. Dozens of people. And I'd go, whoa, no. Remember, we're changing habits. And oh, yeah, no, I remember. I just forgot. And when we reopen, we're going to have some of that same thing where we're just going to have to say, look, no, stop over there. You're 6 feet away. Stand where you are. I know you want to come up close and talk to me closely, but, you know, and then I think also the way that, you know, the world is dealing with, you know, the production and distribution of goods. this whole idea of maybe having some of our critical supplies be manufactured within our country so that we, in a time of disaster, that's what I was telling some of our production people earlier this week when we were going through the prototyping of these masks. I said, look, even if this ends in a few months and we are not making masks, the fact that we have learned how to do it then is actually a service later to the country, years down the road. If there are hundreds or thousands of companies that have figured out how to produce PPE, it doesn't have to be a core piece of our business, but when we're called to action again, we won't have to go through a week or 2 weeks of figuring out how. We can go right into action. So I think there's some good that will come out of this. It's hard to see it right now because of the dark clouds, but one of my sayings right now to all of our people is every day I'm looking for just a couple of silver linings. Just one or two is enough to get me through the day.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I think hopefully one of those silver linings will be that people being nesting and isolated so long want to get rid of all their furniture and get new furniture, right?
I think so, yeah. You hope that, I know my wife has realized that our sofa is now 12 years old and is ratty, and anybody that was an introvert or a little bit of a germaphobe is now like they're having their moment, right? And so my wife was already a little bit concerned about cleanliness and germs, and now she's looking at that sofa like it's the petri dish that it is. She would love to have a new one, so she'll be one of the first orders we produce after all the current orders that were stopped in production are flushed out. I'll get her new sofa for putting up with me over the last few weeks. But yeah, there's some hope that as we rebound out of this, the theory of pent-up demand, I think, is very real. And then I think there's also going to be this idea of nesting a little bit more of where the society was pushing out of the home in a pretty big way. This is sort of reconnecting us to our houses and to our families. I've had both of my daughters at home. It's been one of my silver linings in all of this. I've got a daughter at boarding school, which has now obviously been canceled. And so where she had largely moved away from our family, I've got her back for a few months that I would have never otherwise had. And
Right.
It's sort of an odd little silver lining, but it's certainly making me rethink about family and friends.
Yeah, I have 2 teenage sons. I may want to swap with you.
As long as you keep your sons away from my daughters, we'll be fine.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about, how you're handling orders and inventory, and so that our users know that they can count on you.
No, absolutely. We've got an order entry crew in, and we've got sort of a small group of customer service in all of our companies. So we're actually ongoing and entering orders right now. We're doing it sort of in blocks of time each week. We are sending out memo samples every week and finished samples, et cetera, because we know that there are designers that are projects got put on slow. They didn't get put on stop, or at least not all of them. And so using this time to get ready for when everything reopens, I think is super valuable for people. And so we're trying to provide those materials. As far as inventory, we've got it coming out of our ears. So, when a train stops, all the cars behind it sort of pile up, right? So we closed the factories, but that didn't mean that fabric shipments didn't keep coming in, and that lumber and veneer shipments and whitewood and import martini tables. And we've actually got a crew of senior managers today unloading containers. So we're trying to teach management who are largely incompetent in moving product around how to do that again. But yeah, so we'll be, I think, in the industry in general, will be largely loaded and ready to produce at a pretty high level when we go back to work. And the big question is, when are we going to be able to reopen these factories? We actually have a meeting this afternoon. Our governor's mandate allows companies that can maintain social distancing parameters to operate. And so we've been working this week, and we're going to work some at the beginning of next week, to put in place a bunch of visual cues, a bunch of guidelines, sanitation stations, the whole 9 yards in all of our facilities, with the intent that we will try to open up for production a little bit before the stay-at-home order completely expires. Because once the country reopens, if we haven't been producing for a few days before that, we're not able to begin immediately shipping, right? Production has to run for a few days before product is able to ship out the backside of these factories. So our hope is that that week of the 20th, we will be up and running, at least in some of our facilities, with at least a partial group of people, and basically using our newly installed safety parameters, distancing parameters to do so. One of the things I told our operations crew, because we had a lot of debate about, well, should we just wait the extra 4 or 5 days until the order expires? I said, COVID or Corona is going to be in our community for the next couple of years, certainly for the next 12 to 18 months, until there's a widespread vaccine or until we have sort of group immunity. And so we're going to be dealing with COVID-19 in June and then August and then September. The things we need to do to reopen, to teach our people social distancing, to put in guidelines, to put in guardrails, to put in sanitation stations and hand washing stations, are things we need to do whether we open 2 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now or 4 months from now, because we're not going to get rid of this virus, and we're going to need to get back to producing goods, because there's an entire supply chain and customer chain above and below us that counts on us doing our part in the chain to make it work. And we can't just hold out and wait for some perfect time. There's never going to be a perfect time. What we got to do is get people completely comfortable with the fact that they can do their jobs and maintain safety parameters in space and masks and cleanliness, et cetera. So
are you still able to ship though at this time?
We can't at the moment ship. We could run our distribution facility. The problem with shipping is about 75% of the people, we had a crew calling who can receive and who can deliver. And we were getting anywhere from 70 to 80% of the people saying, that either A, we can't deliver to our own customer, or B, we can't even receive at our fulfillment center. So once we got to that point, we shut down our shipping. And actually one of the things we did, we have 15 of our own trucks and drivers. We loaned them to the local grocery delivery company. It's a company here called MDI, and they're 500 trucks short, trying to supply the Southeast with groceries. So our drivers have been driving grocery runs for the local grocery delivery company, which is a nice way to utilize that capacity.
Yeah.
So when we need them back, we prefer them to be delivering furniture to our customers. But it feels good again to be able to help a little bit in that way.
Well, I think everyone will appreciate seeing a Century truck loaded with toilet paper.
Exactly right. I've got one of the funniest things somebody sent me from one of our factories before we shut down was a buggy full of fabric and a sign posted to it that said high-end toilet paper. So if we get into a real crisis, we've got the supply and fine chenille toilet paper here too. So.
Wow. We had Gail Singer on last week from Visual Comfort, or Circa, and Gail was saying that she's been hearing that receivers are just not accepting product. So it really is. When that opens up, that'll change. But the product is certainly there.
That's right.
Do you think that when things get back up and running, lead times are going to slow down a little bit, or what's happening with the factory?
There'll be two pieces. Big factories like ours and the other ones in this area, they don't start up easily. So there'll be a little bit of a lag in the first couple of days as everybody kind of rearranges their work area. We get the machinery of the system kind of running again. But then I think we'll see lead times actually come down over the next 8 to 12 weeks. So if you take out the fact that we were closed a couple of weeks and you say, well, when producing, will it be as quick or quicker? And I'll tell you why, is because frankly, the business is going to be smaller for a period of time, and the capacity is going to be greater than the business. A lot of us, we're doing the same, but a lot of our smaller competitors, especially who have access to this payroll protection program are going to be able to maintain a larger workforce, a larger capacity than they would otherwise. And with a slower or smaller order volume, we should be able to push things through better. I have been telling customers I've talked to, though, it doesn't hurt to reach out to make sure, that if you've got an order, that you get it in line. Because part of what we're trying to do is line up the queue so that when we restart the factories, we know how things are going to go into production. Make sure you get us our COM or a deposit if you need to place a deposit on the order. That way there's nothing holding you up, because what all the companies down here are going to do is they're going to go through their backlogs and quickly sort out what can be made and what can be shipped. And those items that are clear, we have the fabric, we have the deposit and everything, those are going to go to the front of the line. We're going to make a call. Can you receive this? If we were able to produce it and ship it and we get a yes, that's going to go into production. We are receiving COM right now. We have a crew that comes in a couple of days a week that both rolls, inspects, and logs it into our system, because we don't want to get backed up on that front. Again, when we flip the switch and begin running, we want as quickly as possible to get running at an efficient level.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice for our group.
Yeah.
So have you, a couple more questions, and we'll open it up to the audience. Have you created anything innovative as far as communicating with your staff working remotely at this point?
I wish. I think we're using all the same, we're fumbling with all the same tools that everybody else is fumbling with. Instagram Live and, and Zoom. And at the end of the day, we have learned that we are not as sophisticated as we need to be collecting and maintaining our customers' data, email addresses and text capability, et cetera, because we'd like to be able to broadcast some information out more efficiently. And part of that's, depending on our company. Hickory Chair is a little bit better than Century, and Hancock's a little bit different than both. And so we got to find a way to get a common RHF communication system. Of course, by the time we get it perfected, hopefully we'll never have another situation like this again. But you do learn that you're missing a couple of things that you wish you had. And for our own employees, really, one thing we've realized is times like this are fraught with rumor mill creation. So that you get lots of things that people heard from a friend's mother's, boyfriend, and all of a sudden that becomes, the lore and the law. And so we're trying to stay in front of that. Say, look, we using our own websites will communicate with you. We will call you. We will send correspondence. And I think that's settled down a little bit. We had, crazy enough, yesterday there was an enormous explosion in Hickory. A factory about 1,000 yards away from one of our factory that makes hydrogen had an explosion that they could hear 35 miles away. It broke windows in the entire neighborhood surrounding it and shook the floors in our factory. And so I got 25 texts immediately. I was 10 miles across town and heard it. And all of a sudden texts start blowing up, my phone's blowing up, and Alex, that wasn't one of your factories, was it? And then I got a text, I heard a plane crash. And then I got another text that said, we had an earthquake. And it was just a good lesson for me. And, unfortunately, knock on wood, no one was killed in the explosion. My understanding is no one was even injured, but they had 150 cop cars out there surrounding this factory that blew up. But it was a great example of what happens very quickly in a time of crisis with the rumor mill, right? Within 5 minutes, I'd heard, a plane had gone down and we'd had an earthquake and one of my factories exploded, and none of it was true. And there's a little bit of that same thing going on in this sort of slowly eroding crisis of the COVID-19, that, the information that is coming out is not always accurate. And I've even been behind the information curve, and I'll communicate something to our people, and then an hour or two later, I'll have to retract it and say, no, upon further reading, or we dug in deeper, and this is now what we know. And I'd say the one other thing that's happened that's been good, maybe a half dozen to 8 furniture company owners and leaders, and we are trying to communicate with each other and help
Nice.
each other, exchanging patterns for PPE. We're kind of giving input and advice on how to handle certain issues when you're dealing with governmental officials, maybe the unemployment world, et cetera. And that's been nice to see our industry on the manufacturing side come together and be very open with sharing, because we all know that the most companies that we can get through the crisis, the better we are all off. We all rely on the same vendors, and we all rely on the same customers. And so, helping each other get through it, helping our suppliers get through it, and then helping our customers try to get through it. I mean, that's the whole deal. Try to not atrophy the system.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's my whole belief that we're all part of a community and we have to support each other.
Yep, one big ecosystem.
Yep, exactly. Well, Lauren, let's open this up to our audience and see what kind of questions we have.
Sure, Keith. I have a question from Jeffrey. He's asking, Alex, we know your companies will make it. We are hoping the small companies will make it too. Any thoughts or predictions on what the future looks like for small companies?
It's a great question, Jeffrey. I would tell you that one of the most fundamentally important things that the federal government's done in the last couple of weeks is the SBA piece of the CARES Act, which I believe they're going to vote on tomorrow to expand the funding size of that, so that every small business that qualifies and can get an application into their financial partner can get access to those funds. I was talking here recently about we are too big to be a part of it, but a lot of our suppliers and a lot of our customers, most of them, are small enough to access those funds. And the way that's set up as a loan that can then be turned into a grant and forgiven is fundamentally the best tool to get people through the crisis. So I actually think good, capable small businesses may actually have a higher survivability likelihood than businesses that are above that criteria. Because once you get above it, it's a different sort of government support package. It's not quite as beneficial. It's a little bit harder to see your way through it. And I think most companies that are above that threshold, hopefully, if they were running a good business and they were conservative about how they ran their business, then you're leaving availability or liquidity for a rainy day. And that's kind of the way we because my mommy and my daddy taught me to be conservative. We've kept quite a bit of liquidity for a rainy day, and so we feel very comfortable, and we feel comfortable that a lot of our industry players that are our size or larger will also have that same safety net. But I think the small businesses, if they can be nimble, I'll give you a piece of advice that I gave to a friend of mine recently. This was before the PPP, the payroll protection program, was really a known entity, and he called me up and was inquiring about his workforce. He didn't have many, about 20 employees, and he was leaving them on payroll at the moment, but he was worried they only had about 4 weeks of cash available. And my advice to him, which sounds kind of hard, was actually meant as a kindness to him and his employees. I said, you need to go ahead and work with them, get them mentally comfortable to sign up for unemployment. And I said, you got to get out of the way of your own ego, because no business leader wants to think that I've got to go put my people on unemployment. So, but what the federal government's done is they've increased the unemployment benefit and reduced the waiting period, because it's a tool for you to get your people through the crisis, and you need to use the tool available to you, because if you hold out with an ego in the way of that, and then you lose your whole company, then you've done a disservice to all of your people, and it's a permanent disservice. But I think for small businesses early on, there was that uncomfortable sort of ego component of, gosh, I don't want to sign my people up. I want to keep my people on my payroll, but you're depleting your funds in a way that wasn't necessary and was reducing your possibility of surviving. So I guess that's my one piece of advice is bite the bullet, swallow your ego, use the tools available, because surviving is so much more important to your people than any short-term thing that you think has the optics of looking better or looking nicer.
Good advice. You know, we've said that anybody who's going to survive this is going to do it because they're nimble and they can really react when they need to, and rather than let it, you know, sort of slowly die down.
Yeah, I agree.
Lauren, do we have other?
Yeah, sure. I have a question from Gary. He's asking, designers without direct accounts order through design centers, which are currently closed. To order samples and obtain pricing, shall we go through the local rep? If so, how do we find their names and contact information?
Sure, good question. So all of our showroom managers are still on our active payroll. Their support people, we had them sign up for local unemployment based on the state they were in, but our managers are all working, but they're working from home and working remotely. They're answering their email address, and they're also fielding phone calls that are routed through the showrooms. So your first step would be to continue to work through your showroom manager from the local showroom. And if you have an issue figuring out what that contact is, you can certainly email us at here at the main office at Century. We've got a link, and I should have it right off the top of my head, but what that email address is. But if you go out to our website, there's an inquiry button there. But please continue to use our showroom people, even though they're not physically there. They can get you those memo samples and those finished chips ordered. And then you're also welcome to use our local representative. If you have those contact information pieces, reach out to them too. Happy to help. And then don't hesitate. We have customer service here at the main office too. If all else fails, call us. For us, other than the safety of our people, there's nothing more important right now than helping our customers figure out how to process their orders. Because as we restart the machine, that's the lifeblood for all of us. Is, you know, we were laughing the other day. So somebody's got an order, everything stops, and let's help with the order, because the order is precious.
Yeah. So is that link on your website, Alex, for them to reach out?
Yeah, I think it's info@centuryfurniture.com, but there's a different one on each company's website. So if you need something from Hickory Chair, if you go to their website, you'll find it there. Hancock and Moore, likewise, Highland House or Century or Jessica Charles. And you know, and the local representatives are certainly there to help, and our showroom managers, both Hickory Chair and Century, are there. And frankly, if you have a question that's not a Century question, but you have the contact for a Century person, ask them. They will get you in touch with the person at Hickory Chair or the person at Hancock. Everybody is cross-linked and here to help. So
great.
Great. I have a question from Marlene. She's asking, do you think that some of your staff will work permanently from home?
That's a good question. I think it'll increase our ability to have people work from home, but so much of what we do is social in a way that I don't know that even if we gave people the choice, they would want to work permanently from home. We do have people that commute a little bit further distance, and I could see them having more work at home days or half days. But a lot of what our people get out of the office or the factory environments are sort of community and emotional connections that it's just, as much as I love seeing Keith on the Zoom, it's so much more fun to sit across from the table from Keith.
Great. I have a question from Andrea. She said, Alex, when you said the 20th was the date for a partial plant reopen for Century, does that also apply to Hickory Chair?
That's what we're hoping. So we're going to meet this afternoon. We're actually going to talk about next week on the 13th reopening. I think it's at this point unlikely because too many of our suppliers are closed. And then we'll pivot pretty quickly to talking about the 20th. I would say probably an 80% chance we'll open on the 20th. And if we do it, we'll do it across the whole company, Hickory Chair, Century, Hancock, all of our facilities. And then that week we reopen, we want to make sure that we're not going to require anybody to work. So anybody uncomfortable, we're going to explain to all of our employees what we put in place to make sure they're safe, that we can maintain distancing. But we have to make sure that enough people do come that we can run a factory. So, if you think about a factory, if none of your seamstresses show up, it's kind of hard to upholster because you can't sew anything. So that's the sort of caveat of, there are a couple of pieces of communication that have to fall in place, and then there are a couple of components in the workforce that have to also be in place. But if we were to do it, we'll open up everywhere.
Great. I have another question from Ryan. He's asking, once things get back to normal, do you foresee there being any differences with lead time projections for different product categories? For example, do you think it'll be easier to get upholstery pieces completed and shipped versus case good products?
That's interesting. So we're one of the few companies that still run our own domestic case goods factories. So both Hickory Chair and Century have US case goods factories. I don't think we'll see any extended lead times there, except the caveat is the entire industry gets its hardware made overseas. And a lot of that comes out of the Philippines and Vietnam. And right now, the Philippines is also shut down. So there's the potential of small supply disruptions that could cause sort of variable lead time differences. If we have plenty of bales for a particular chest, it doesn't matter that it's made in Vietnam or the Philippines and they're closed because we have plenty of inventory. But if we were right at the edge of a reorder of something, then that other piece that's dependent on a piece of hardware could be longer lead time. So I think the answer is going to be, and even in the fabric and upholstery world, we're going to have tons of fabric in inventory. But if we have a specific fabric that is sourced from a country that happens to be going into their epidemiology curve later than the US, then they may be going into a stay-at-home or a shutdown scenario after we've reopened. If you think about it, China has reopened, but China is dependent on the US as a marketplace to ship goods to, and we're going into shutdown. So even though these Chinese factories are opening, they're getting purchase orders that are being delayed and canceled. They were in the curve early. So when we come out of it, if we've got suppliers that are coming into their curve after we are emerging from ours, we could see, as I'd say, variable supply shortages. So it won't be upholstery versus case goods, and it won't be, necessarily a particular component type or classification, but it could be specific items that come from specific countries that randomly affect different products. And so I would say right as we reemerge and we reopen, that ability to communicate and say, okay, give me an order status on my order based on the unique pieces that I need to get produced. And it could be, if you're ordering 4 things, 3 can get made very quickly, and 1, because of a component for that one item, may be delayed. And we're that'll be sorted through in the first couple of weeks. Fortunately, a lot of our supply base seems to be on our same timetable, but that's not going to be the same for every company. So long-winded answer, but it's a challenging topic. For the most part, I think the supply chain is going to be reopened when the producers are reopened.
Great. Lauren, I think we have time for one more question.
Sure. I actually have a couple of comments from users who want to express their gratitude. So Victoria is saying that it's really forward-thinking view. The level of detail going to is remarkable. Thank you for all your efforts. And then Diane is so proud to support your manufacturers doing that. And then I do have one final question for you to answer. Bob is asking, sure, how has the shutdown affected your plans for the development of new product?
That's a great question. So there's a big question mark still about the whether the market that was supposed to happen in April, which got rescheduled to June, will be able to happen. I think the final answer on that's going to be determined in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, development sort of stopped in place. We can't produce, we're not developing. Our product people are still thinking through, different development components, anything they can do that doesn't require the factory and the sample makers to be a part of it. I would tell you that there will be a decent amount of what would have been introduced in April that's going to be introduced in October, or will be exposed to the marketplace over the course of the summer as things sort of thaw and begin to operate again. As far as product itself, we're actually thinking through product categories and alterations to product categories that may be more in demand after a crisis like this. I'll give you an example, and this is insider information, so Keith, your entire community here can't share this too broadly, but we think slip covers may be an important product coming out of this crisis. So if you're somebody at home, you may want the ability to take a covering off your upholstery and have it dry cleaned or washed more frequently, because you're more conscious of cleanliness and viral load, et cetera. And so we're exploring how do we begin to develop maybe more slip covers for our products because of the way psychology may have shifted in this. Another one that we're beginning to work on a little bit is finishes for tabletops that can be cleaned with bleach wipes, Lysol wipes, right? We're all now big proponents of this, but that's not particularly good for nitrocellulose furniture finishes. So what can we do to develop some finishes that would be more durable for more stringent chemical cleanliness? And as you go through that, again, it's just the way we're going to change how we all live a little bit. If we all thought the COVID crisis was just going to end in 2 weeks, we would do different things. I'm a believer, unfortunately, that we're going to be living with this as sort of a community low-grade illness well into the future. Once we get past the real crisis, the health crisis, it's going to be something that's just a part of our lives for a while, and our lives are going to change because of that. So the little things we can do in product development around finishes, around slip covers, maybe antimicrobial fabrics, I think are going to be important cues for the consumer coming out of this. Hey, I was thinking about your living room on that sofa. How about we think about a slip cover that can go over it that you can clean every couple of weeks? I'm a homeowner. That's a great idea coming out of this. So my 2 cents.
Alex, you just brought me back to my childhood and living in the 60s with my mother changing our entire house with slip covers for the summer.
Exactly. Throw pillows and slip covers. Yep.
Wow.
And Lysol handy wipes.
Yeah, smart, innovative thinking. So, Lauren, we're going to move on from questions?
Yeah, that's all the questions we have for today. So it was a wonderful interview too.
Well, Alex, thank you. I've always appreciated the relationship we've had through the years, and having you as such an important member of our community share these thoughts is really very much appreciated, and we wish you well. My new sort of sign off is stay safe, stay healthy, and stay sane.
Yeah, absolutely. Back at you, Keith, and to the whole studio designer community. Thanks for taking some time out to listen to us, and hang in there. This will one day be a memory also. We just got to get to the other side of it together. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Alex.
And Keith, would you like to, I will thank you again for this great webinar. And next week, we're going to be welcoming Tom Stringer. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending the session.